Hello and welcome to HyzerMedia's coverage of the 2022 Tinicum Open from Tinicum Park in Arena, Pennsylvania. This tournament is brought to you by BS Upshot Tournament and Shop. It's also brought to you in part by our Patreon family. Thank you to them for all of their support, and thank you to you for joining me here on this beautiful, bright day here in Pennsylvania. I'm Dave Oster, here to bring you the final round coverage, starting off with Phil Shuit shooting the hot round 1061, 13 down, almost course record. Blake Kelly, 7 down. Andrew Hendry, 6 down, pretty tight on second place. And rounding off our lead car, Jimmy Pedrick at a 3 down. Again, this will be the final round, conclusion to this tournament, and we're going to start off as we always do on hole 1, par 3, 404 feet. Gotta hit the gap between the trees, and then pretty much if you get the shot shape right out into the open, land near the basket, you can get a birdie, but not the easiest because of the distance and of course the gap you gotta hit right off the tee. Like I said, Phil starting off first round, huge round, got the first 10 birdies in a row. Doesn't look like he's going to continue that here, off to the left a little bit too much. Blake Kelly, who we've seen a few times on HyzerMedia's coverage before, shooting a pretty good round, other than Phil having a absolutely phenomenal round, shooting the best of the group on just one stroke back. Here we have Andrew Hendry. Looks a little bit more to shot shape. Turned it over a bit too much though. A little bit windier the second round than the first round. So scores are going to be a bit tougher, but we do have some of the holes in the woods, so it won't be all affected by the round. And Jimmy Pedrick looked like he wanted that turnover a bit more, fades out to the left. So we'll have quite a few upshots from these guys. Nice up by Blake. I'll have an easy tap-in par to start. That fades back. A little bit of a tester. Sometimes a putt from that distance can get your confidence started off right and around. Andrew kicking off the base of the basket. And Phil actually looks like he has a bit of a run. And that headwind just said absolutely not. So he'll also still have a bit of a tester. Good putt for Jimmy. Tailwind putt. Phil having the opposite, pretty much a headwind putt to save his par. Oh, that needs to sit. There's a little bit of a slope. Got the nose down into the headwind, but just kicked it a little bit too low. Ooh, and almost skips out left, so Phil with quite a bit of a different start compared to his last round. Obviously, it's only hole 1. But with the bogey bringing him one stroke closer to the rest of the field. As we move over to hole 2, par 3, 304 feet. Got to throw it straight up the gap. If it doesn't turn at all, you'll have about a 25-30 footer. If you can get it to finish a little bit to the right, you'll have an even better chance at getting a birdie here. After Phil's bogey, Blake will have the tee. And looking to throw the turnover. Oh, catching the limbs on the left side, kicking right side. He got most of the way down the fairway, so he should have a pretty easy up and down. Andrew looks pretty good. Got it turned over just a bit too much, didn't quite pan out and get all the way up there. It is also slightly uphill with the somewhat low ceiling. But only 300 feet, the distance shouldn't be too bad. Jimmy also turning it over just a bit. And you can see that right to left wind probably pushing those discs down quite a bit as they get turned over. And a little bit flatter for Phil, but then you see as soon as it gets turned over, it just shot down to the ground. So only 300-foot hole. These guys have a little bit of trouble with it. at least getting up to the basket. And with this wind definitely being a factor as well. And you can see it there again, Jimmy just a little up putt and not even able to get it as close as he wanted to. Andrew also having trouble with the wind. Oh, the mock baskets are definitely known for those spit outs. So it was a little bit left side, wind blowing right to left. Could have been more center, but that's probably something that these players are going to be dealing with anytime they're playing on this type of basket. So a couple of tap ins, all pars. No harm, no foul as we move over to hole 3. Par 3, 402 feet. Only danger really is going too wide right, getting caught up in these trees. There also is the OB road long. But really the wind, again, is going to be the issue for the players. So probably trying to swing it wide and use the wind to bring it into the green. And it's going to probably do something like this, push it way far left. But again, all these backhand throws, if you try to throw a flex shot, once you get it turned over, the same thing is going to happen as the last hole, where the wind will just push it down and you won't make it there. So this was another play, but it flipped over too much and got caught in those trees. Try to get that light flip distance to get it moving back towards the basket to prevent the wind from blowing it way left. And a little bit of slip on the gravel there for Jimmy. Just skies it up into the air. Phil was able to birdie this one the first round. Gets it high but wide right. Needs to spike down. And he's maybe circle's edge. Actually, closer than that. 25 feet. So definitely a tricky hole with this wind. Not able to swing it super wide as we saw Andrew get caught up in those trees. But we saw from Phil that it is doable, so. Here's Blake. Actually has, looks like he's running it a little closer than it looked. Oh, and off the rim twice. Tickled some chains, but headwind just blew it right back out. And Phil, with the inside the circle putt, hits the pole and bounces straight back out. Unfortunate result for a pretty good throw here on hole 3. And conditions definitely different as we haven't seen a birdie yet, but that could change here on our first par 4, 553 feet. Drone is going through the straight, almost left line. There's also the right line Hyzer throwers will likely take. Getting up to and past this road is a good shot. OB road all along the right. The crossing road is not out of bounds. Second throws are trying to maneuver through these trees. There isn't really a clear line, but they're spread out enough that you can find one depending on where you end up on your first shot. And the wind is still coming left to right. Now we've turned around. And off one of the early trees and kicks it out of bounds road. So Blake's now going to have a decision of whether to try to find a line back into the trees or play over the road, which is probably the most open spot. And Andrew with a good throw through a very narrow gap on the right side, but just able to skip it back inbounds. Jimmy keeping it a lot lower, a lot more inside, not bringing that into play, and gets a lot of ground play with these dry leaves all the way up to the crossing road like we saw. Pretty good throw. Phil getting a little bit more height on it, good line. Kicks that tree but doesn't go out of bounds, stay safe. So they're all about in the same spot, of course, other than Blake, who is deciding to go skipper off the road. Needs to come back. And it does. Left to right wind, not really letting it, but gets back just in time. Jimmy going with the forehand flex, needs to get through clean. And catches the one of the last trees, but he's just outside the circle. If he decides to run it, depending on which way the wind is blowing for him. Phil going very wide over, and again, wind not quite letting it come back as much as he wants, but just barely gets in bounds. He'll have a circle's edge putt for his birdie. Andrew with the furthest drive wants that to turn over a little bit more, but that should be just fine. He'll have a 15-18 footer for his birdie. Blake happy to just be back near the basket after 2 shots, but unfortunately that will be a bogey for him. Oh, and just low for Jimmy. Gave it a good run downhill. Feel a little low. And good birdie for Andrew. One of only a few on the round today. This hole was coming in as the hardest hole at 0.71 strokes over par. The wind coming off the field to the left and the OB road to the right, I'm sure, were factors in that. But good hole for Andrew as we move over to hole 5 with an alternate tee pad playing from just to the left of hole 4's basket to the normal 5 basket in the middle of the field. Still par 3, still 254 feet. Pretty much wide open. Again, the challenge is going to be the wind. It's kind of a cross headwind right to left. So doing just this, kind of throwing it in there and letting the wind blow it back towards the basket is about what you have to do. And now Andrew will have about a 20-foot tailwind putt, which is probably about as good as you want from the wind like this. Jimmy's going a little bit left and hits the chains. Almost aces it. Spits out 254 feet. Take a look at it again from another angle. Came in very hot. Just right side. Kicks through into the back. You have to think maybe a different type of basket would have caught that, but either way, that was a great throw and is able to stay right there. Pretty much a tap-in birdie for Jimmy. Bit too high for Phil. He'll have a downhill headwind putt coming back. Maybe circle's edge. And that's a difficult combination. Downhill headwind. Even just a bit low. Guaranteeing at least the par. Good putt for Andrew. Now 2 in a row. Gaining 2 strokes on Phil in 2 holes. Plus the bogey on 1 has gotten within 3. 3 strokes closer to the lead, that is. Phil will tap in his par, and Jimmy, after this ace run, spit out just a tap-in birdie. So 3 birdies here on hole 5. Great play by these guys. Definitely some highlight throws as we move at hole 6, par 3, 281 feet, just around the corner. Low ceiling if you come in early, and very thick stuff if you go past the basket. A lot of room to the right. You have to swing it back in. And that looks pretty good. Just gets past those branches. He should have a look at it for his birdie. Make it 3 in a row. Wind coming left to right out of that field on the other side of the row of trees. And is definitely affecting Jimmy's disc as it blows it well outside of the area where he was looking to land it. Needed to either get more stable or put a little bit more hyzer on it to counter that wind. Blake looks like he's doing that. Throws it a bit higher, but a bit too wide. And he's going to be out there with Jimmy. Maybe a little bit longer, but Probably still outside of really giving it a good run range. And Phil's disc looked like it flipped up. Didn't choose it to be stable enough. And a little bit inside. Maybe he will be close enough to run it, but pretty safe run. With a putt, if you get into that stuff, it's right next to the basket, so you can probably still manufacture a par out of that. Blake also giving it a run. Hitting that tree, but that should be an easy par. And Phil almost ringing it up. Another highlight putt. And now Andrew with the best actual look at it. Inside the circle. Nails it. That is a turkey of birdies for him. And brings it within 3 of Phil. After a seemingly uncatchable pace after the first round. Andrew is now just 3 back, and Blake is only a couple behind him, so we have a match. Hole 6 coming in at exactly even par, so the card actually shooting one better than that. As we move over to our second par 4, hole 7, and passing our totem pole pal, 377 feet. Tight gap straight towards the long pin. A little bit of a flex line. We see the drone flying too. This short basket is not in the ground today, but where we see the arrow with a long pin in the basket, we want to get over that fallen log straight or flex around to the right side. Andrew up first. Needs that to flip a little bit, and it does. Does it get over the log? No. Hits the log. So from there, probably less than 100 foot up and down for his birdie. Ooh, decent kiss off the tree, keeping it straight for Jimmy. And with a par 4 under 400 feet, if you even just get halfway, you'll have an under 200 foot approach. Blake maybe going for that flex line, doesn't quite get it over enough. But even there, like I was saying, being short enough, that is not really out of position for the birdie. And very tight gap for Phil, and getting extremely lucky all the way through. That is going to be an eagle putt. Not surprised for the distance, but it is a very tight line, pretty much all the way down. Blake catching another tree, so now he's got to get this up and down for birdie. Oh, and he catches one right off the ground and get a counter skip. And even after all that, he's going to have a maybe circle's edge putt for par. Another little kiss for Jimmy. And even with that, he's going to have a birdie putt. So we see Andrew here right at that log. Just a little easy flex forehand parked under. If you get through pretty cleanly, pretty easy birdie. And now this is Blake for a par save. And just a bit low and left. Jimmy for his birdie. Just a little bit. Tree on that right side made it a little bit difficult. And now here is Phil for his eagle. Oh, and almost spits back out. But he nails it. Great. We'll say a good fortunate shot. Good fortunate shot. We saw off the tee. He kind of missed his line. He set it on the course, but it is a 2 down, putting him back, right back on pace at where he started the round. Hole 8, par 3, 202 feet. Just a little chip shot. You can throw the forehand low. Try to skip it in there. A little low backhand flex shot, or the pure Hyzer shot. Try to skip it back in towards the green. And another very narrow gap for Phil, and he will be in the circle putting for birdie. And look at this. We have a thumber Oh, that could have been a very cool shot. The thumber flex skipper in there. I didn't see that line, but obviously Andrew did and almost executes it. Jimmy going low right, and even catching that last tree, he'll have a 20-25 footer. Blake looks like he's going the Simon line, high and right above everything. And gets through cleanly. A little fortunate roll towards the basket, and he'll have maybe a little outside circle's edge putt for his birdie. Oh, Andrew not able to get it clean through that tight gap. We've seen a couple of highlights already. We see down below our Patreon. We do post the highlights of every tournament before we post the coverage. So if you want to see that ahead of time, as well as get access to our monthly disc giveaways, a thank you on the beginning slide of our template of every tournament round, you can check that out and some other tiers over at patreon.com/HyzerMedia. And Jimmy sneaking one in there for his birdie. That was probably a 32 footer. Oh, and Phil also getting it just over the rim. So some pretty good putts, bringing Phil up to 15 for the tournament so far. Andrew with the unfortunate bogey, really separating him from the lead again. But here we have a very short par 3, 135 feet, backhand line. Just have to narrowly miss these trees and you're parked. If anybody really wants to go for it, there's also a forehand line that can get you in there pretty cleanly. And that should work. Just a little bit up against that tree. But that's a putt for birdie. A little bit more inside. Little stick slowing him down, and he'll be right next. Blake, similar line, a little bit less power on it, and he'll be just a step or two closer to the basket. And you can expect this from our lead card. Going pretty easy. Oh, I spoke a bit too soon as Andrew kicks off early right. But short enough, he's still inside 70 feet or so. And he's under the basket for his par. So now we have 3 birdie putts. Oh, and just a bit left. Spits through. And low. Maybe worried about the spit out, trying to just barely get into the bottom. So Blake trying to save the card. The only birdie on the shortest hole of the lead card, and he does so. Hole 9 as well as hole 8 coming in as tied for the easiest hole on the round at a half a stroke under par. Although lead card not quite reaching that. But good front 9. These guys are shooting some highlight shots. Basket's giving them a little bit of trouble. But we're moving into the back 9, the conclusion of this round. Thank you all for watching. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to HyzerMedia. We have a few tournaments left this year, and then next year we'll be ramping up. We also have some off-season coverage of some casual rounds, fun challenges, things like that. So if you want to check those out, hit that subscribe button. Other than that, we'll see you on the back 9.